Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clay Jenkinson. I have the honor of being the Theodore Roosevelt Scholar in Residence here at Dickinson State University, and I just want to say this is a day that I have been looking forward to for 2 years, and this is a very, very great day for Dickinson State University and for southwestern North Dakota and for the Dvirnak family. And I want to greet all of you. We have a full program today, but before I introduce the president of the university to greet you, I want to give you greetings from two others. Darrell Dorgan, the director of the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame, called me yesterday evening and said that he was sorry he had a pressing meeting that he had to be at elsewhere tonight. He wished he could be here, but he said to greet the Dvirnak family and say that the Dorgans have a long relationship with the Dvirnaks, and he said to tell you that 30 years ago his father brought raspberry bushes up to the ranch and that he understands they have flourished and he would like a couple of bushes back if it's possible. So I told him I would pass that on, but he said to greet you and to tell you what a great honor this is for Western North Dakota and for Dickinson State University. And I also bring you greetings from Lee and Deanna Vickers. President and Mrs. Vickers retired, as you all know. They've moved off to Phoenix, Arizona. They were involved pretty heavily in this project and were really encouraging this, and we're so glad that this was going to occur. And they were sorry that they were not here any longer when this event occurred, but they did send their greetings and pay their respects to you and to President McCallum. Now I'd like to introduce the new president of Dickinson State University, and one thing that really delighted me when Dr. McCallum came on board is that he made it clear, imagine being the new president of an institution and all these lists of possible things that are coming up and events and different initiatives that the university is engaged in. And when he saw this one about Roosevelt and the Battle of Killdeer Mountain and the Dvirnak family, he said, I want to be part of that. So we're so delighted you're here, Dr. McCallum. Welcome, and please say hello to everyone.
Thank you, Clay, for your kind introduction. And on behalf of Dickinson State University, it's my sincere pleasure to extend greetings and words of welcome. We're so very pleased that all of you are here to help us celebrate this occasion. In my opinion, this is a very special day. And it is a very special day because Mr. Dvirnak and his family are making a special treasure available to us as a university, to the community of Dickinson, and to the entire region. When we unveil the display, I know that you were going to be impressed because I had the opportunity earlier today to be able to spend a little time with the display. It truly is exciting and it truly is wonderful. Mr. Dvirnak, what you are doing by sharing this with us is very special. I believe that this act is generous, thoughtful, and very future-focused because you are sharing a piece of history that is going to help us understand our past and plan for the future. And I believe that a number of individuals besides the university community and the community of Dickinson will come and enjoy the resources that you spent a lifetime collecting and assembling. I am absolutely convinced that it is a historic treasure. We feel very grateful that you have allowed us to have your treasure displayed here, and we look forward to sharing it with others as they come to visit our campus and to visit our library facilities. On behalf of everyone who's involved with this project, please accept our sincere thanks. We are truly indebted to you. It's my pleasure to return the podium to Clay, and we'll resume with the program.
This is Alex Knight, and I want to get to him just as quickly as we can. I do want to say a couple of words about where you are. Welcome to Dickinson State University. This is Stoxen Library, and you see that it is the temporary home of the Theodore Roosevelt Center. The library has generously allowed us a small amount of space for the Roosevelt Center, but we have very ambitious plans for an adjacent, connected but freestanding Theodore Roosevelt Center. You can see artists' renditions of it here. This will be a library edition, a big portion of which will be the National Theodore Roosevelt Center. And let me just tell you for a moment what that means. Theodore Roosevelt, as you know, lived here for a couple of years off and on. He said 15 in his usual exaggerated way. It was about 4 years of time here and there. But it was really transformative time for Roosevelt. And he later said in the White House, when he was serving as the 26th president, he had Albert Fall, the senator from New Mexico, in his office, and he said, do you ever think about the most important memory and experience of your life? And so they sat there for a moment, and Roosevelt said, if I could only save one memory of all of the memories of my life, and here's a man who climbed San Juan Hill, and here's a man who climbed the Matterhorn on his honeymoon, and a man who traveled in Egypt and went on safari in Africa and explored one of the last uncharted rivers in South America. He said, if I could only keep one memory and every other memory had to go, I would remember those years that I spent as an authentic cowboy and rancher out in Dakota Territory. When he came through in 1900 to campaign as vice presidential candidate for William McKinley, his handlers wanted him to skip Medora. They were on their way from Bismarck to Dickinson to Billings and so on. They said, well, we're not going to stop in Medora. There are no votes there. And Roosevelt said, we're stopping in Medora. And so they stopped, and Roosevelt got out of the train, and he looked out at all these people he had known in his childhood. He had been 25 years old when he came out here. And many of them were older than Roosevelt, and most of them were more weathered than Roosevelt. They brought their children, and they'd come in from all over the place. And he looked out at them and he said, it is here that the romance of my life began. So at Dickinson State, we're going to create a National Theodore Roosevelt Museum and Library and Research Center. And if you've been to a presidential library, the Reagan Library or the Eisenhower Library or the Carter Library or the Clinton Library and soon the George W. Bush Library, they're marvelous facilities. Presidents before Herbert Hoover don't have presidential libraries. They weren't invented yet. From Herbert Hoover on till today, every president has a presidential library, but because Roosevelt comes before Hoover, his papers were dispersed at the time of his death. Most of them are at the Library of Congress, some of them are at Harvard, some of them are in private collections. Until the digital revolution, we couldn't have built a presidential library for Roosevelt because, of course, you can't expect Harvard to give us their papers, can you? But if we digitize those papers, we can assemble everything that Roosevelt ever produced, everything he wrote, everything he collected, every letter he received. We can have the national, virtual, digital Theodore Roosevelt Library in western North Dakota, and we're going to. It's just a marvelous idea, and it's going to put this university on the map, and it's going to be an economic engine for southwestern North Dakota, and it's going to deepen our national experience of this great man. We're just thrilled about it, and this is just one part of it. This kiosk that you see here with Roosevelt's statue on it is the first of our electronic portals for Roosevelt. I invite you to take a look at it while you're here. But this is going to be the window through which scholars here and Boston and Tampa, and for that matter, London, Paris, and Sri Lanka, have their entree into the world of Theodore Roosevelt. So it's all underway. And this Dvirnak collection is the first of the pieces that will help contextualize Roosevelt's time in North Dakota, the world he traveled in, the people he knew, the adventures that he had. And so we're so thrilled that you've put this collection on loan with us so that we can interpret it and we can fold it into the early cattle history of North Dakota and the Little Missouri River Valley and the Battle of Killdeer Mountain. this collection that you will see in a moment is important for four reasons to us. Four really important things happened there, and all that before the Dvirnaks brought stewardship and their own ranch consciousness to the place. But before that, historically, it goes all the way back to Lewis and Clark. When Lewis and Clark were wintering at Fort Mandan, Charbonneau, their Hidatsa interpreter, came out to the Killdeer Mountains with some Hidatsa on a hunting trip in January of 1805. And we only know that this happened because Charbonneau frostbit his face, and Lewis and Clark report maladies. And so when he got back, William Clark said Charbonneau had been out, they called it the Turtle Mountain, not to be confused with the Turtle Mountains, but this was called Turtle Mountain then, and that here he got frostbite. And so a member of the Lewis and Clark expedition was at the Turtle Mountains in 1805. Then Prince Maximilian of Wied from Germany, who was here in 1833 and 1834, hunted extensively in the Badlands, and he had a hunting camp in the Killdeer Mountains. So that takes it up to the next generation. And then the most important historical event in the history of the Killdeer Mountains was the Battle of Killdeer Mountain that occurred on July 28, 1864. And that is the foundation of Alick and Craig Dvirnak's great collections. That battle was a 9-hour battle. 2,200 Army soldiers fought against and a couple of thousand of Native Americans. The Army won pretty decisively because of superior firepower and artillery. And the Native peoples eventually decided to flee west to get away from this onslaught, and they went down ravines into that really impenetrable region west of the Killdeer Mountains that led, among other things, to the legend of the Medicine Hole. But the battle is a very important one. It's really the moment when the Indian Wars, the struggle between the United States Army and Native peoples of the Great Plains, came to North Dakota in a decisive way, July 28, 1864. And then finally, if that weren't enough great history, our man Roosevelt went to the Diamond Sea Ranch. When Roosevelt tracked down the boat thieves who had stolen his boat at the Elkhorn, he tracked them down in late March and early April of 1886. He actually made a citizen's arrest up at the mouth of Cherry Creek, north of the Killdeer Mountains. And then he tried to get these three desperados down the Little Missouri River to Halliday, and then he was going to go down the Missouri to Mandan. The river was frozen, he ran out of provisions, and eventually Roosevelt decided to march these desperados overland to Dickinson. So he marched through the Killdeer Mountains looking for help, and he came to the Diamond Sea, and he borrowed a carriage and a driver, and he put the desperados in that carriage, and Roosevelt, walked 45 miles from the Diamond Sea Ranch to Dickinson. He turned in the three desperados to the sheriff here. He got a reward of $50. His feet were in really, really bad shape. He could barely walk, and so he went down the street and he found the first person he found. He said, "I need to see a doctor," and that person turned out to be Victor Hugo Stickney. And Dr. Stickney said, "I'm a doctor, I'll help you." And so Roosevelt went up to his office, and Dr. Stickney lanced Roosevelt's boils and cleaned his feet and did what he bandaged him up. And then this is the part I love best. Roosevelt immediately left on the train for Medora because there was a meeting of the Grazing Association that night. So he's just had this ordeal. His feet are as badly injured as they can possibly be. He's just had one of the great triumphs of his life, but now he rushes back that same evening to Medora so he can preside over the Little Missouri Cattlemen's Association. This is a man of great civic virtue. Anyway, Roosevelt was there in early April 1886, and Alick knows where he came. That building no longer stands, but there's a photograph of it that you can see. So this is a really great story, and it has radii that go in all sorts of directions. It's centered on our man Roosevelt, but Roosevelt was also deeply interested in the Indian Wars and had intended to write about this battle. Events in his life simply got away from him. So we're thrilled. And we promise you two things. First of all, we're going to keep the entire collection in this cabinet. Nothing will ever leave this cabinet. Those pieces that are not on display are in storage below. That's number one. And secondly, we promise to interpret this with as much rigor and energy and creativity as we possibly can so that we can spread the good word about your lifetime of hard work to as many people as ever visit the Theodore Roosevelt Center. So on behalf of Dr. McCallum and Dickinson State University, I just want to thank you personally. This is a deep, deep honor for us and for me. I've had a chance to get to know Alick and Grayce a little over the last 2 years, and it's been unbelievably delightful. So thanks. Alick, come on up and tell us a little bit about what you've done here. And I'm going to unveil this. You see what we did with it here?
I want to see
Are
what
you ready?
did. I am. Part of it.
Oh, wait. The rest is here. See, we have all the arrowheads and shell casings and maps, and it's all here.
That's it. Oh, so I'm supposed to tell you a few things about where do I start? I suppose I should go back when my dad purchased the ranch, and I was 10 years old. That was 1929. I loved the ranch. I looked for artifacts right from day one, and I found many of them. I sold many of them because that was the only way I could get a dime or a nickel when I went to town to get an ice cream cone or something. Time went on, and I decided I wasn't going to sell anymore. So I put them in a box, and people would come and want to see it. I'd show them to them, and next time I showed them, I seen some of my best ones would be gone. So eventually I put them back in the showcase. I put them in the showcase, and it went from one showcase to another. When we left the ranch, I had a showcase built here in Dickinson, and I had them in our home. Craig took the showcase over at the ranch, and I'll tell you people, if you want to really see some nice artifacts, Craig has got them at the ranch. Many of them he picked up with a metal detector that go back to trade items that they traded with the Indians, and it's really something to look at. What have I done here? I didn't know what I was going to do with my collection for many years. And then when our daughter Cindy was visiting as one of the alumni from the Dickinson University, she got in with Mr. and Mrs. Vickers, and this was brought up about my collection, and he said, I would love to have it here. So really Cindy got the ball rolling as to this display here. She couldn't be here today. She's been teaching in Savannah, Georgia at a university there, and she just couldn't get, well, the school was out, but they had other commitments, and she could not be here. The rest of my family is here, Diane and our four boys. They all had, they picked up, Brian especially, he picked up many pieces of cannonball. pieces, I don't know if they're all displayed here, but he found as many of them as I did. The cannonball itself, I and my brother found that, and one unexploded one. The rest are pieces. Arrowheads, they're picked up over the ranch. Really, I think the most important one that I treasure the most is the one of Bear's Heart. During the battle, there was a travois coming towards Sully's troops, and somebody was chanting as the horse pulling the travois. What was he saying? I wouldn't know, but possibly death to the white man. As they got to the horse approaching the line where Sully's troops were, the sergeant said, "Hold your fire, boys, hold your fire, hold your fire." And then he said, "Ready, aim, fire." And he says, when we fired, the horse went down, the chanting stopped. And these are his words: "We ran down with fixed bayonets to finish the Red Devil off." Wow. He says, when we got there and looked, here was a lad that never walked. Paralyzed, his legs, he had no use of them at all. He said, the sergeant said, "You know, this lad deserves a rifle salute." So he said, we picked him up, we laid him back on his travois, we laid his spear across his chest, and left him there for the wolves to drag off. I looked for that arrowhead, or that spearhead, for many years, and then I completely forgot about it. That somebody must have picked him up. I planted 3 rows of trees a mile long there on the section 3 along our road coming into the ranch, cultivating those trees in '85. And I thought, well, I wasn't even thinking of that arrowhead or the spearhead. And as I was cultivating and I looked out ahead of the tractor, I see the spear point laying there. I said, well, it's got to be Bear's Heart's point, because this is where O'Connell said that the lad fell. I got off that tractor, I picked that point up, looked over the area. This is it. This is Bear's Heart's point. I picked it up, it's on display here. I think that's one of the treasured pieces that I picked up. What else can I say? I'm just happy to leave this here with the university for the public to look at it and enjoy it as much as I did.
Let me take some questions.
Go ahead.
Yes, questions for Alick? Could you tell us a little bit about the battle and how you started to scope it out as a working rancher?
I think Craig could probably do the best job of telling about that, because he studied the maps. He studied if he'd come up here if he wants to.
Sure. Come on up, Craig. Come on. It's you don't want to do it? You won't do it.
As the battle progressed, of course, the Sully advanced into the camp about a mile square, and he had his soldiers on the outside, his cannon on his side. Wherever the Indians would try to attack, the cannon were there, and they just blew them apart. They slaughtered them off. There was no way that the Indians had even a show against the cannon fire. I've picked up pieces of cannonball, right from the ranch headquarters, about a mile away from it. I've picked up pieces. Brian picked up pieces. Picked up mini balls, anything that was inside of those cannon. And then the grape pellets or the grape shot. I had my dad find one time where the main Indian camp was. He gave it to me. I was shocking corn, hot, thirsty. I took that and I threw it. I thought, and I never did find it after I looked for it. I told Craig with his metal detector, I don't think he's ever found it either. What else can I tell you about the battle? Sully give orders, destroy everything and take nothing in the wagons. And so the soldiers, they burned about 150 ton of dried smoked meat, bags and bags of dried berries, 1,600 teepees. This was all destroyed there at the ranch. And then they looked into the ravines. They couldn't find, or the ravines were full of cache that the Indians hid. So they set fire to the timber and they burned the ravines out. When once they left the battlefield, word got back to Sully, so-and-so disobeyed your orders. And what way did he disobey my orders? He took a beautiful buffalo robe, and he has it. So he called this soldier down. Where is that buffalo robe? Or you disobeyed orders. Where's that buffalo robe? He says, I didn't disobey orders. You said, take nothing in the wagons. I have it wrapped around the reach under the wagon. This is what O'Connell, the man that told about this bear's heart, he said that was the only thing that was taken from there. And old Sully, when he looked at that robe, he says, I don't blame you for taking it. And he says that was the only thing that was taken from that Indian encampment, which was 1,600 teepees. They estimated about 8 to a teepee, so that you can figure that out yourself, how many, they estimated how many Indians were there.
Here's a question.
You've got a cemetery on the property with some, I think they're all troopers' graves. Was that the original cemetery, or were those graves relocated?
No, there was a relative of the smallest man on that expedition that fought with the Indians. He marked those graves. He come up, he got off at Heart River where Sully had his main camp, what he left behind with the emigrant train. And he walked from there all the way out to the ranch, and he marked those graves. I didn't know that till years, when we were still on the ranch, there was somebody looked at that and they said, on the plaque there it says the exact location is not known. He threw a fit. He says, my grandson come out here to the ranch, and he walked all the way from Heart River and he marked those graves. He says, this is where they're buried. Craig, my son, he got in touch with Glenn Tisver. He said, I can tell you if they're there. He says, I witched for graves, and I could tell you there was other graves that we wanted him to check out. And they come and he said, this is the place that they're buried there. And he witched it. He showed their feet do stick out beyond the pipe fence, maybe 3 feet, 2 feet to the east of the fence. Then he took him out, up on the south slope of the mountain years ago when I was still a lad. There was an Indian come out to the ranch, and he wanted some help locating. He said, there's a ridge over the top of a ridge, running crossways. He says, could you help me find it? Or could you guide me to it? At that time, we didn't know, and that was in 1929. But I still remembered that. And one day while I was riding on the mountain and coming in as the sun was setting, and I looked off to the east, and I seen this, and it just rung a bell just like that. Many times I rode over that. I didn't know what it was, but I rode and I looked at that. There's a ridge across the ridge, just a kind of a dome shape, and then there's a round dome. What is it? And Craig, he got this Glenn Tisver to come out, and he checked it out, and he says, this is a mass grave. He says, the ridge across here, it's adults. But he says on that dome shape in the middle, or off, that's about, maybe 50 feet to the southeast of on that same ridge. He says in the center, there's a female skeleton, and off to the sides, just like spokes, those are children buried there. This was never dug up. Well, I said, I know of 2 more graves. 2 more, one ridge about a mile south of here. Well, Craig says, go and check it out. Of course, you take 2 copper wires and you try it and it'll swing and it just, you have to try it. And that was another grave. That's a mass grave. Then on section 3, there's 9 skeletons there. Who they are, I don't know. Probably never will. I wanted to dig them up, and I inquired at the state, and they said, no, that's a no-no. You don't do that. So I think that's about all I can.
I wonder if you would do us just one more favor, Alec, and then people can come up and see the collection. But I had the chance to go down to Grand Junction to interview Grayce and Alec, and it was really a marvelous experience. And we spent a whole day going over these stories, and a lot of the stories you told me weren't about the battle; they were about your life as a rancher and as a young man on the ranch. And you told this extraordinary story about the sourdough. Will you tell the sourdough story? Yeah, give us the sourdough story.
Oh, did you have to bring that up? When we were running livestock on the reservation, on the Fort Bertha reservation, and I was helping a man with the branding, a man by the name of Leo Sorensen. Maybe there's some here that know him or knew him. He's passed away now. And up till that time, it was soda biscuits, bacon powder biscuits. I got to where I didn't like them, but he made sourdough. He had sourdough, and I said, "Could I borrow some of your sourdough?" Yeah, he said, "You could have borrow." I helped him about 2 weeks, branding. We'd bring in a little bunch of 15, 20, 30 head of cattle, brand them and put them out, and bring in another bunch. So he said, okay, he says, I'll give you some sourdough. But he says, don't you let any Indians see this, because at that time the Indians weren't allowed liquor. And he filled up 2 Scotch bottles for me, these flat bottles. And I put them in the saddlebags, and I rode, it was a hot afternoon. I rode, maybe close to 7, 8, maybe 10 miles. And no Indians coming out. I thought, he said, they'll shoot you if they seen that you had in the liquor bottles. I took my shirt off and I tied it onto the saddle string, and I rode the handstrick out, coming back and heading towards camp, and I was going up a deep trail, and here was a rattlesnake laying up on the bank, and it got to buzzing, and I reined up. I was going to back my horse up. Well, instead, the horse just reared up and pivoted and come down the other way. And just about then, boom! Oh, I'm shot. Some Indian shot me, and I looked back to see how bad I was bleeding. There was nothing but sourdough all over my back. It blew the cap right off. So I get off my horse, and I killed the rattlesnake the first. Then I take the other bottle out of the saddlebag, and I thought, I better let the gas off. And just as I just started, it was boom, and I was dough all over in the front. So that's it. But I learned to make good sourdough pancakes and good bread, too.
She says that's where you met Mr. Dorgan.
On the reservation, yes.
On the reservation,
Yep.
on the big...
That was Emmett Dorgan. That was, that was on the reservation, 1937.
Other questions or thoughts here? I know you're all eager to see the display. We'll have more time down at the reception. Please, everyone, join us down at the Alumni House for the reception. But I think we just all want to say, God bless you, Alick Dvirnak. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before you go, the person who does this extraordinary cabinet work is here. Jerry Hike, would you stand up and take your bows? He's done both the kiosk and this cabinet. Thank you. thanks to Rita Ennin and Eileen Copran of the library, and thanks to Dr. McCallum and to Shanna and Tracy of communications, and to all of you for being here. I want you to have time to come up, pull the drawers out, look at it. There's interpretive material. There will be more. Alec, we didn't label all of the items here because we frankly don't know the story of all of them, so we want you to help us so we can interpret it all properly and determine which parts are battle-related and which parts are otherwise. But this is an ongoing and an evolving interpretation, and once we get to the larger Theodore Roosevelt Center, the Dvirnak collection will expand, and there will be more signage and better maps and so on and so forth. And we're hoping to host a symposium in North Dakota in the next couple of years on the Dakota War of 1862, 63, and 64. I'm sure you all know that the Dakota War was an aftermath of what's used to be called the Minnesota Massacre, now called the Minnesota Uprising, in which in August of 1862, a group of Sioux Dakota peoples from Minnesota killed more than 800 white pioneers in the space of a couple of weeks. And this was known historically as the Minnesota Massacre. And Abraham Lincoln, the president, actually authorized the largest mass hanging in American history. 38 Indian individuals were hanged in Mankato, Minnesota for that crime, that border crime. And then in 1863 and in 1864, the government sent out reprisal parties led by Governor Sibley of Minnesota and by Brigadier General Sully from the Yankton Sioux City area. And the Battle of Killdeer Mountain, July 28, 1864, was the sort of the last big event in the Dakota Wars of 1862, 63, 64. So it's of some national importance, and the battle site is there. You can drive up to it. You can climb up to the medicine hole. I did it just last Saturday, as a matter of fact. And all of that is here, and more will be coming. So thank all of you. As soon as you're done here, go down to the Alumni House. We have refreshments there, and we will continue to honor the Dvirnaks. Thank you so much.